What we do know that we have for sure is Casey Holdahl joining us. And Casey, I want to get your thoughts on last night's game. A team where the Blazers, without Damian Lillard, put up quite the fight against the Toronto Raptors squad that has been surging as of late.
Yeah, it was good to see the team just have a decent game, and obviously offensively they were great last night, and neither were the Raptors. But seeing the Blazers who had a lot of struggles lately come out and play a good game against a quality opponent, I think that in and of itself was obviously a good sign. But doing it without Damian Lillard, who obviously was out of the lineup due to that left sprained ankle, and who I would imagine will probably at least one more game, if not more than that, with that ankle. Seeing them perform and having an opportunity to win that game, I think was a good thing. Obviously, granted, this time of the year, if there's ever any kind of thing as a moral victory in the NBA, once you kind of start getting to the turn of the new year, you have a hard time counting those, basically, because you need to be in a place where you're starting to round into the team that you are. And I think for the Trailblazers right now, you're hoping that the team that you've been over the last 3 weeks is not necessarily the team that you were going to be going forward. But making baby steps right now is basically what this team needs to do, seeing as how they're on a 6-game losing streak and have lost, I think, 10 of the last 11. So they just need to make some incremental progress, and you would hope those would come in wins. But even if they don't, particularly against good teams like the Raptors, I think you leave that game feeling at least a little bit optimistic. Obviously, again, this time of year, for a team like the Trailblazers that have larger aspirations than just making the playoffs, you would hope you'd start to be able to get some of those games and get the win rather than just playing well and then still losing by a couple points.
Sure, and the victory certainly is what's the most important thing at the end of the day. But you look at how the Blazers handled the adjustment without Damian Lillard. CJ McCollum runs point, and this team, Casey, 22 assists on 34 field goals. What does that say about CJ's ability to sort of switch from that shooting guard to point guard role against a Toronto Raptors team that they aren't slouches on defense themselves?
Yeah, I think CJ has proven, particularly, I would say, from midway through last season on, that he is very adept at running both guard positions. He was tasked last night, which is a position he likes to play more, and he laughed it off, and as he has done from time to time, always coming back and saying, I'm a ball player, I'm a guard. I don't want to pigeonhole myself, but I think that if you're going to have to get by without a guy like Damian Lillard, having CJ McCollum there to pick up the slack is probably one of the best options you're going to have. Is lose an all-NBA guy like Damian. CJ has shown that he can do it, both facilitating and scoring on his own. And I think, in terms of the assists and the way that the ball moved last night, I think a lot of that also has to do with Terry's system. And that's something I wrote about today, that without Damian in the lineup, they really need to lean on Terry's, flow offense and really move the ball, because you don't have that safety valve, that outlet in Damian Lillard, where, if the clock gets down, he can just drive to penetrate. He can pull up from, 3 feet behind the three-point line, and you feel good about your chances of getting a bucket on that possession. Without Damian out there, they really have to trust each other and really trust Terry's system to get them open shots, because, there's just not that guy. I think CJ's getting there, but there's not that guy in the lineup right now where opposing defenses say, we really need to make sure that this guy's not going to get off on us. And that makes it more difficult for the rest of the guys to get shots, whereas before, Damian's out there and maybe he's drawing doubles, maybe he's drawing more attention to the defense. That opens things up for them. Without Damian there, they really have to lean on that flow aspect and that ball movement that Terry's offenses have been so good with generating. Now, they've had some issues with that the past couple of weeks, but again, I think that, they get back to kind of some of those core principles. They get a little bit of practice time at home, which they haven't had lately. And, I think you have some reason to believe that they're going to be able to get by without Damian. And again, they're not playing particularly well with Damian in the lineup right now. So, in some regards, anything they do right now that's positive is a positive, because, they're just trying to make incremental steps to get better going into, the new year.
Casey, you're talking about the Trailblazers really from an offensive perspective, and very entertaining to watch. Terry Stotts' offense, whether it's in flow and transition or even in the half court, all of the flares and guards getting from one side of the floor along the baseline to the other, using screens, reading and reacting and ball screens after that. it's fun to watch and difficult to defend. We've watched the Trailblazers over the last, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 games do some different things defensively and not necessarily do them consistently. We've seen certain personnel bring certain defenses, i.e. Kyle Lowry and the blitz and not blitzing Corey Joseph. Can you speak to the defensive personality of this team? Do you think that this team will continue to blitz, to pressure, to extend, and to try different things defensively?
I think the last thing you touched on, Mike, is I think it's most like they're going to try different things. It's not, I mean, at least, to have Terry Stotts, particularly he talked about last night in the practice, they're not just going to go out and do what they did against the Raptors every night. They're not going to go out and blitz ball handlers and guards because, not every team is going to have a 1-2 punch like the Raptors have with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. So, I mean, take tomorrow night's game, for example. Not really a situation versus the Kings where you're thinking, boy, we really need to get the ball out of Aaron Collison's hands or Ty Lawson's hands. Though obviously Ty Lawson had a really good game against the Blazers last time they played, so I guess maybe perhaps you would consider that a little bit more. But it is going to be on a night-to-night basis. I mean, their principles of forcing mid-range shots and kind of trying to limit the amount of clean, easy looks that teams at the basket, which, again, has been something that they've had issues with this year. That's not going to change on a game-to-game basis. But I do think that you're going to see Terry be a little more experimental, I guess, with some of his defensive principles, just seeing as how, when you're the 30th ranked defense in the NBA, something's not working. And they're to the point in the season now where that's who they are on defense. So I think at some point in time, you have to start, making some changes that while I probably wouldn't say drastic, or at least diversions from kind of their base defense that they've used, in the last couple seasons under Terry. So, I do think they're going to throw different things at teams. And I think particularly with Damian out of the lineup, they're probably going to really focus in on the perimeter and see if they can lock down a little bit more than they have with Damian out there. But, they kind of are who they are at this point, and there's only so much you can do with scheme. And I think, seeing last night, I think they had some success with it. I don't know if I would chalk up all the difficulties that the Raptors had on offense last night to the Blazers playing defense the way they did. But, I mean, you got to give them credit for that, at least in certain respects. So, I do think that we're probably reaching the point where they consider making some stylistic changes on a game-to-game basis, but I do think it's really going to be driven by opposing personnel.
So, speaking of opposing personnel, speaking of stylistic changes, Sacramento Kings come to town. DeMarcus Cousins, I mean, I'm sure he's fresh on the mind of most Blazer fans based on the last game. He went for 55, and I remember Terry Stotts' comments after the game, really pointing out some of the challenges to doubling a big guy that is out on the floor. DeMarcus Cousins is not your traditional center. I don't know if there is a traditional center in today's NBA where they're back to the basket and you're doubling and you're rotating and you're doing things of that nature. Do you think the Trailblazers are willing to experiment with the scheme to address doubling a guy like DeMarcus Cousins when he puts the ball on the floor?
I think they would consider it. I am not expecting them to do it because I think that Terry was going to ask about the notion of, well, you try to double him. And, yeah, when he's got the ball on the perimeter and he's willing to take a couple dribbles and get to the rim, it's hard to throw a secondary guy at that. Now, DeMarcus Cousins probably going to be trying to split a whole lot of double teams. Probably not, and I think there is something to be said for trying to sell out on DeMarcus Cousins and seeing if there's anyone else on the team that can beat you. I think we saw with the game in Sacramento that while Cousins obviously had a great game, a lot of his teammates had great games too. So there is that probability or that opportunity, I guess, for the other Kings to really kind of make hay if the Blazers throw everything that they have at Cousins. But I just think that in the post, I guess you can try to double him and force some turnovers, but he's quick and he can really move at the basket. His footwork is fantastic, and again, he can put the ball on the floor. So that's a guy who it's hard to double team him. There's a reason why DeMarcus Cousins is the best center in the NBA. I think it's fair to call him that at this point. It's because he's really good, and there are not many guys in the league that can stop him either one-on-one or with multiple bodies. So. I think they are, kind of to my last point, they're at the point where it's, we got to try everything at least once right now on defense. But I think that really what they probably try to do tomorrow night is see if they can, if nothing else, take away the 3-point looks that Cousins got. I mean, I think he went 5 for 8. Terry Stott's talking about that today and saying you assume he's not going to shoot at that clip for an entire game again. Though I think he is shooting somewhere around 50% over the last couple weeks. So I think with Cousins at this point, if you can just if you can cut down on his clean 3-point shots and make things a little bit difficult for him closer to the basket, that's about the best you can hope for right now, because he's playing great basketball, and the Blazers, again, have had some issues stopping guys and obviously stopping Cousins from the other night. So I think that in some respects you got to kind of own up to who you are and who it is you're playing, and rather than shooting the moon, just trying to do the small things you can to make a difference and hope that it pans out.
And Casey, we don't know how much longer this team will be without Damian Lillard, but moving forward, let's say you have another game without him, his offensive production, CJ is going to make up for some of it, but not all of it. Who else needs to step up, or who else do you see the Blazers turning to get more of Damian's points that are out there to where this team can get close to sort of the average that they had been at for the season so far?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you kind of look at two of the guys that they signed and or re-signed this offseason. I mean, I think you look to Evan Turner, and I think you look to Allen Crabbe. Turner, I thought looked pretty good in the game last night, coming off of missing a couple games with an ankle injury. I thought AC had a really good game defensively, even though he didn't score a ton. So I think those are kind of two of the guys that you look to. One, because they're guards, and they can somewhat slot into those positions and kind of do some of the things that Damian does. Obviously not close to the level that Damian does in that, but at least you have Evan who can dribble, drive, and get to spots. You have AC who can pull up from 3. So I think you look to those guys, and I think as someone who's already been playing really well lately, Mason Plumlee. When you lose Damian's playmaking, Mason has shown throughout his time in Portland that he is more than capable of picking up the load in terms of initiating offense and playmaking, and he's been doing a great job with his scoring as it is, and I think you look to him a little bit more to be more of a facilitator, like you saw obviously in the series versus the Clippers in the playoffs last year. So it's a team thing, and again, like, they really need to lean into kind of the core principles of the offense to make up for Damian's absence. But again, in the game against the Raptors, I thought they did a pretty good job of making it without him. They went 4-3 last season, even when they were struggling with Damian out of the lineup. So, they've shown they can do it before. Now they got to go out and do it against the Kings and actually get a win in that game.
Casey, thanks again for joining us. We'll definitely see you tomorrow night as the Blazers get set to take on the Kings.
Appreciate it, guys. Take care.